Chris said earlier about how important it is to look at your international audience because you can make more money abroad than just in your home territory. So let's just define breaking artists internationally as earning a decent living abroad. Some examples of artists that I think we've had a good hand in doing that for are a band called Bad Bad Not Good, who are a jazz quartet now from Toronto, Charles Bradley, who's a soul singer from New York, and Run the Jewels, who are a rap duo from America as well. So today I'm just going to run through a few broad brushstrokes of how we approach international campaigns. First of all, I think that you need to have music that works abroad. So it might sound obvious, but if the singer sings in Arabic, then there's probably only certain markets or certain audiences within markets that they're going to reach. So you need to think about where that is. Then you need to start thinking about actually how you're going to find an audience abroad. You need to form a connection with that audience. Now, that actually, obviously, there's an online connection, but by that, really, I mean building a network. So that might be a network of live promoters or a distribution network, or both, ideally. And then you need to be communicating, ultimately, with that audience and with that network. Now, we all have finite resources, especially in independent music. So it's really important to evaluate what you've got and figure out how you're going to focus that. You need to establish what the most efficient use of your team and the tools that you've got available to you is. You should look at what countries you're going to target first. You might have an audience in Bangladesh, for example, but how are you going to get there? How are you going to release a record? How are you going to tour? You also need to understand your demographic. Really, I mean, I think in terms of focusing your resources and trying to tackle the worldwide as a whole, that's going to be really difficult. So actually, rather than trying to fund a whole world takeover from day one, it's actually much more about understanding your audience in each market and what things they have in common. So for example, your subset in America might also have very similar behavioral patterns and reasons why they like your music as that in the UK or in Germany or in Italy or beyond. And then you just need to make sure that you're communicating with that global audience. And I think that works on two levels. There's ultimately the centralized messaging from the band or the artist and how they can engage their fans worldwide, irrespective of where they are. And then there's also local messaging and actually taking some time to understand the local markets that you've already identified to be a priority. Do you need to do local language translations in your messaging? Does that work for that market? Perhaps not. Perhaps, for example, in Scandinavia, everyone speaks amazing English, actually in the Netherlands too. So when you're speaking to people in Holland, you probably don't want to translate your messaging into Dutch. However, in France or Spain, that's a little bit different, and you might actually want to think about that. So I just wanted to run through a live example that we've got at the moment. Cigarettes After Sex are a band that haven't yet released their debut album, so we can't actually claim to have broken them internationally. However, there are some really good hallmarks there, and I thought it would be interesting, given who the audience is today, for us to just chat about it, and then maybe you guys could tell me in questions how we should be doing. So they're an American band. They've already sold 20,000 tickets in Europe between March last year and their upcoming April 2017 tour, which is already almost sold out. They've done that by self-releasing an EP and a single, and then Partisan Records, who is a label that I work very closely with, signed the band in August last year. We then put out our first single in the UK at the end of last year, and just Annie Mac, to our surprise, said that it was one to watch for 2017, and so now we've got their debut album coming in June. Just to apply some of the approach to what the band did, to find their international audience, it actually happened organically. The band had only had music on Bandcamp, I think in 2012, and a fan ripped it and put it on YouTube. And then flash forward to the end of 2015, their UK booking agent saw one of the tracks that popped up after the new Radiohead video. The booking agent got in touch, asked the band if they had a European agent. The band said no, so they started a dialogue and started booking shows. It's worth mentioning at this point that at that point, the track that the booking agent saw had already accrued about 10 million hits on YouTube. How that happened, we don't know, but we think that it's probably a combination of people actually genuinely really liking the music, repeating, listening, and sharing. And actually, it's quite a strong name that we have here. And it sounds like cigarettes and sex, especially, maybe put into the internet quite a lot as a search term. So in terms of building a connection, the band built a website, they became active on social and all the other usual socials. They started tracking their growth in order to understand where it was coming from. And then they built a network out of live promoters. Then that's when they recognized that actually, even though they had been DIY up to a point, they knew that they actually needed some help from a proper label with a proper distribution network that could actually help take it to the next level. And that's when we got involved. In terms of communicating, they continue to listen to the audience. They literally respond to every message. It might take them a while, but they do it. And they actually listen to what the audience is responding to. So by that, they keep a very simple, clean aesthetic. The color of an aesthetic of my slides today completely matches their logo, artwork, everything. It's very straightforward. They self-released more music, and they watched at the engagement rates of that, and they figured out a pattern how to do it. So for example, they always alert their fan base on all of their social medias a few days before they put out new music. We're probably not going to work with Premier partners because this is what works for them and their audience, and they always continue to do everything in the same way. And they always spend like about an hour at the merch desk after every show talking to fans. They really, really find that very important. Just a quick snapshot of where we're at in terms of the stats. We're now up to 100 million YouTube track plays, 215,000 Facebook followers, and then Spotify, we're up to 500,000 listeners and 20 million plays. It's worth noting that all of those stats have doubled since September, and we put out a new single in November last year, so it shows that we're onto like really good momentum here. Interestingly, in terms of the markets, there's a really strong spread. I've just listed the top 10 there, but I can tell you, obviously we have so much different, I'm not going to talk about data, lots of other people who are much better at it than me have this past couple of days, but this is a fairly even spread. And so it can be challenging but you kind of get lost in like where should we go? If we've got pretty much 7,000 of these 500,000 in every market that's showing up in the top 20 to 30, then how do you prioritize? So in terms of focusing our resources, we really put a lot of emphasis on working together. When we started working with the band, we spent a lot of time talking to the promoters and trying to figure out, actually this ties into the next slide, I'm sorry, but trying to figure out who the people were that are actually showing up at the shows already. We've got a really engaged artist. Actually, we are still a small label, and we knew that most of our resources are in the US and the UK. So we actually went to our distributor, PS, and we said, look, this band's got an international audience here. How can we work with you more closely to get a better global footprint? And we've actually started working with their centralized international department, which actually don't normally work on distributed labels. They usually only work on PS's licensed content. Or licensed labels. We got a really engaged artist. We talked to them, we involved them in everything. They know their fans better than us. For example, they are very good at their socials. They want to maintain control over that. They don't want to do any videos. There's no point of spending money right now or trying to fight them on that. We'll wait until they're ready to do that, or Michelle Gondry offers to do it for free. And yeah, like the name, it always strikes up a conversation. I haven't really told somebody who hasn't heard about the band what the name is without them raising an eyebrow. So we just kind of let those conversations happen and not worry about it too much. In terms of understanding our demographic, we're still partway through this, I'm not going to lie. I think a few of the things that we do know about them is that, well, firstly, it's heavily international, but as I mentioned earlier, we actually can identify some key things across all the countries. In terms of who they are, I think that there's a huge proportion of women, 18 to 25 especially. They write love songs, so it's not a huge surprise. When you go to the shows, you see a lot of girls making out with their boyfriends. But there's also an older male fan base as well. A lot of people who are fans of Cocteau Twins, Mazzy Star, early 90s 4AD style bands are really taken with them as well. So there we know that we've got two demographics there with a largely international spread that we can figure out ways to market to. And then in terms of executing the global strategy and speaking to our global audience, we're kind of taking a two-pronged approach. The reality is that when, as a label and as label services on my part, got involved in the summer last year, the band had already done a lot of the legwork themselves. And so it's really important to us that we actually don't affect that too much and that we carry on and support them in that. So really the job of the band is to maintain their relationship and connection with their fans. They use the internet as much as they possibly can. Offline, they're touring as much as they possibly can, and happy to say that they're selling 1,000 tickets in Tel Aviv and booking shows in Thailand, and not necessarily traditionally strong record markets, but it's great for them. And just generally working together. They're a very open band, and I think that that's really, really important to have international success, is actually to be working with a team, including the artists, who really get it. Our job is definitely to build that global campaign, to really look at each market that we can do well in and try to leverage the growth internationally across them. We are finally putting in, I should actually mention that all of the success that they had without our involvement, they didn't actually hire any PR or promotion or do any paid marketing at all outside of North America. So our job is to now bring that in to really help support them and take them to the next level, basically without fucking it up, which is a bit scary. And yeah, just generally, again, working together. So I think 4 minute, well, that definitely brings me to my final slide. So how'd you like that timing, Chris? Does anyone have any questions? I think just generally paying for things like tour support before there's an audience there. I think that's been the sort of hardest. Having conversations with partners about getting a band over abroad, and finding that you know, there's a lot of pressure to get a band from America, for example, to the UK, but ultimately, if there isn't an audience there, then it's just a massive waste of money. Actually, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, we've actually had a situation where our own distributor was trying to sign the same artist, which was a bit awkward. And I'm happy to say that we actually ended up signing the artist. And it was a really important step in our relationship with our distributor, because it actually made them pay more attention to us. So it was actually really good for our relationship. And I think ultimately, I accidentally finished the presentation with working together, but really that's what it's about. I mean, the marketing panel earlier was awesome, and listening to everybody talk about how complicated marketing is now. I think it's really important to have a holistic attitude and a holistic approach to everything you do, and that's really only possible across all the different areas of an artist's career if everyone is working together.
Sorry. We've run out of time. I'm sorry. Zena, you're around for a drink after? You're around all day?
I am.
Thank you very much. So sorry. Thank you very much. Really good session.